Good morning. I know it's bright and early, but it's Friday. I've been up and at 'em and getting a lot of stuff done, and I thought I'd come on here quick and have a little chat with all of you. So good morning. In case you don't know, my name is Patti Mason, also known as Pepperspray Patti, and I have been empowering women and teens to confidently defend themselves for 5 years now. Holy smokes. Yeah, I just, listen, in September of 2015, you know what, I'll even back up. Um, some point in about a year or two before September of 2015 was the big bulk of my personal healing from a domestic violence, abuse, physical abuse experience that I had had, and was able to leave my abuser, get divorced from my abuser, and then started to rebuild my confidence, my self-worth, and my strength. And I did it all with self-defense. And so that's kind of why I do what I do now, is because sometime not long before I started Pepperspray Patti, I realized how far I had actually come, because I will never ever forget the day that I had a breakdown. And it was while I was going through the divorce and trying to get away from my ex, and just that whole experience. I wanted to be able to put it here and move on. And he was constantly texting and harassing, not threatening, but just the berating, the belittling, manipulating, just everything. And it was so wearing on me. And when we talk about domestic violence survivors, at that time, that's what I was. I was a survivor. I had survived a beating, and I was doing everything I could to stay alive. And now, today, it makes it hard to call myself a domestic violence survivor, because I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm thriving, I'm living life, I'm growing, continually healing and working to be a better person each and every day. And a lot of that energy and motivation comes from that experience in that place. And the fact that, you know, I spent a length of time, about a year and a half, surviving. And so I had gotten to this point where, like, I I was about ready to give up. And I was sitting on the end of the bed, and you just in tears, and my head down, and I just thought, this will never be over. He'll never be out of my life. It'll never stop. He'll never give up trying to manipulate me. And the more I fight, the more he fought. And I can't take this anymore. I'll never move on. that was the moment of despair. And it didn't make it any better when I said, okay, you want this to end, Patti? You want to be able to move on? Then you need to step up your game even more than you have. And so I went to the resources that had been given to me, a packet. As a matter of fact, it was a packet of information from the county that we were living in at the time, the county where the domestic abuse happened and was charged. My name as the victim went to the county's local nonprofit that helps women and children and families with violence, with domestic violence. And they had mailed me a few months after the experience, they had mailed me this packet of resources and tools and information. Of course, they mailed it to the house, that the address that we were living in, because that's the address that they had for me, because nobody reached out and contacted me and said, hey, are you okay? Where are you? What do it was just this, you know, um, generic pre-stuffed packet that they sent out to all victims. And it made me feel so like insignificant. It was like, why did you waste your time on the postage? Like, you know, um, if you're really an advocacy for domestic violence victims, pick up the damn phone and call me. Hey, are you okay? That would be the first thing that I would say. Are you okay? Where are you at? All they knew was that a man had been charged with domestic abuse and battery. And I'm trying to think now if it was about a month or so, somewhere between a month and a two, so like a month and a half after it had happened. It must have been. It must have been before before there was a sentencing, but after he had been charged. So in between that period is when they sent me this information. No follow-up, no nothing. It was like, there's a lot with the system that is not as beneficial for the victim as it could be. And I think that, if we really sat down and looked at the system, put together a panel with, the advocacy groups, law enforcement, the DA's office, and then actual victims like myself, who, especially, I consider myself to have gone through, as much as my actual abuse and that experience was horrific. Truly, the the process and the system that I went through from that point forward was probably as bad, maybe even worse. I mean, right off the bat that night, the police officer gave me incorrect information. He told me that um, that from that moment, for the next 72 hours, that I have a order of protection, and he is not allowed to, come near me or contact me or anything like that for 72 hours. Well, it turns out that that was, it used to be that way. And for quite a bit, it seemed that the new policy is that the victim actually has an order of protection automatically from that point until there's a sentence. So instead of 72 hours, I would have had all of October, all of November, all of December, and part of January. Um, I probably would have had about 3.5 months of protection that I didn't have and didn't know that I had. And so I based a lot of my decisions on the fact that after 72 hours, I was basically on my own. Um, so that was right in the get-go. From there, like I talked about, reaching out to my local church, and they didn't have, I would have loved, an intelligent thing is that here's the reality, especially like a church deals a lot with families. And so, you know, a suggestion to churches would be to have, to create a violence, protocol, so that when you have anyone in your church community that has been attacked, whether it is by a complete stranger in a parking lot, or in their home by their husband, or they've been raped or abused, whatever it is, anyone that is going through, and you can define, what it is. You have someone who's been kidnapped, abducted, um, any of these things, that we have a system, we have a plan so that we can help that person. And I get that every single situation is different, but there are some things that, you know, they there's there's so many other things that could have been done or could have been said to me other than, well, when things settle down, you're welcome to come in for counseling. That was not what I wanted to hear, and it had absolutely no help. But again, reiterated to me that I was alone in this, and that again affected, that was the next morning, and that then affected all my decisions, after that, and what I did and who I talked to and how I talked to people. As each interaction that I have kind of leaves me hanging and feeling completely alone, that then progressed into, less and less of reaching out to people, less and less of telling people, less and less of trusting and counting on people. When I was going through an experience that jolted my trust in people significantly anyways, here's this person that I absolutely love and made a commitment to for the rest of my life, just attacked me. And I had no idea. It did not expect it. I never would have imagined that would have happened. And so my perception of my confidence in my ability to trust people and read people and believe, that was rocked. It was significantly rocked. And then I'm reaching out to other people that were the highest level of trust, and being disappointed and humiliated. And you get to this kind of point where there's no one to trust. There's just you. And and that's a scary place to be. And add to it um an extreme level of humiliation. I was completely um completely humiliated. Pride was a really big one that I was kind of going through. And this is so not where I thought this conversation was going to go. Honestly, you guys, I actually have my bag of like pepper sprays and that kind of stuff right here, and I was going to do a quick little rainy day demo on pepper spray, and we kind of went into this conversation, I guess, of, the system. Another thing that happened is about a year and a half after I was physically abused, my so I had, sitting on that bed, enough is enough. I got to do something. That's where I was. And so I pulled out that envelope and contacted that place and said, you know, I'm having problems. I can't get this guy out of my life. I'm trying to get this divorce. Like, we don't have kids. We don't have property together. This should be a cut and dry, simple thing. This should have been done a year ago. But he's just constantly trying to manipulate me, and I'm I'm exhausted with fighting. What resources and tools do you have to help me? And they're like, well, we can, recommend some, attorneys for you. Okay. I appreciate that. Is that the only, is that the only option that I have at this point, is um an attorney? What other, do you have someone that I could just, that has some suggestions? Um, I don't have money to hire an attorney, and I'm not sure what I'm hiring them for. What, to hire to stop my who I want to be ex from harassing me? That didn't seem like that was the solution. What can I do to end this, manipulation, to end all this, other abuse? He can't physically abuse me, so he's doing everything else he can to make my life a complete hell. And so she said, well, do you have a restraining order? An order of protection? And I said, no. I said, he hasn't been threatening. Um, and she said, oh, okay, and the reality is that what I ended up doing was I sent out a message to him uh, that said, do not contact me. Do not contact me. If you want to talk to me, you can do it at our court appointment. And that made him furious. And then he tried to bring other people into it to get involved. And I had people emailing me and, hey, he wanted me to reach out to you because he's trying to get this resolved, and you're not you won't talk to him to help him get this resolved, and he just wants to, get this and I'm like, now he's got other people, he's manipulating other people to, bug and harass me. And so each of those persons I responded. I told him not to reach out to me, and having you reach out to me is the same thing. And so I am saving these emails, I'm printing them off, I'm taking them to court. If he has anything to say to me, he can say it in court. And so it got to that court appointment, and the judge says, so have you guys, got this all resolved finally? And he stands up and says, nope, she won't talk to me. And I clarified to the judge that, no, I'll talk to him. I'm just only going to talk to him here. I don't want any more of, and the judge at that point, who was frustrated, just kind of, stopped me and said, well, if you guys don't have it resolved, then we have to take it to a trial. And then he just went through the process, got the paperwork, handed us each our paperwork for that, and then with the next court dates and whatever and stuff, and I went and I sat down in the chair where I had been, and he got up and he started to walk out, and as he was passing by me and I was looking away, he said, do you want to come out here so we can talk? And I ignored him and I just continued, and he huffed and he walked out, and I continued to sit there. And there wasn't another thing to call up, so I just continued to sit there, and everyone was kind of picking up their stuff. I don't know if it was lunchtime or whatever, but they everyone was kind of moving around and clicking up their stuff, and the judge, who was still sitting there, even said, you can go. And I said, I'm not leaving until he's gone. And we all looked out the door and saw, sure enough, that he was standing out in the hallway, right out. You could see him right outside the door. And so at that moment, he came in and started to, come towards me and was saying something not pleasant. You could tell he was very annoyed. And I got up and moved closer to the bailiff, and the bailiff stood up, and at this point, the judge stands up, and everybody, I'm moving this way, and everyone else is standing up and moving, towards him. And so he turned around and he jetted out of there and jetted right out of the building, because we waited about a minute, and then the bailiff walked me out. I stopped, I looked out the window, saw that his car was gone, checked my car to make sure that I still had air in all four tires and it wasn't, on fire or, whatever. And then the bailiff walked me down to the clerk of court's office, and I filled out a order of protection. And then was granted a temporary restraining order, and was informed that I had to take this stack of papers to the sheriff's department so that he could be served. And when I went to the sheriff's office, I filled out their paper and handed them the stuff that needed to be served with the form. And she says to me, "You didn't put his address on here." And I said, "It's a domestic abuse restraining order. I don't have his address. I don't want his address. I don't want him to have my address." That's why before filling out the form with my personal information, I asked her, who will have access to this? Is this a public document, or is this a confidential document that only stays in your office? Because I was not going to put my address or my phone number or anything on there, because I was trying to hide. And he was continually finding me. And so so she kind of didn't know what to do when I didn't have the address. And I'm like, no offense, but don't you have a bunch of detectives in there? Maybe you should do a little detecting and investigating, and you can figure out what his address is. And at this point, I had a little bit of an attitude, and then I commented, well, why don't you contact his parole officer, and find out from them what his address is, because isn't he supposed to have a current address on file with them at all times, since he's on parole? Now I did say that intentionally because I knew that he was unlawfully living in a different state, and I wasn't sure how he was getting away with that, and so I did bring that up, and um, it was probably a good month and a half before he got served. I actually we had the court appointment that would have been the court appointment for that permanent restraining order. We had to reschedule because he hadn't been served yet. And, just there's so much with the system that could be fixed. And it's not like there's complicated stuff in domestic violence. 100% agree with that. Every situation is different, and there's a lot of complicated pieces to it. But once physical abuse has happened, there are some basic things that could be fixed within the system that would actually make it better, not just for the victim, but for everyone else, make it better and easier for law enforcement. Like that packet of information, that generic pre-stuffed, this goes out to each domestic violence, victim packet. Um, why does each police, why not take that instead of you mailing it to the address where I was abused and probably shouldn't be? If I'm still at that address, dear God, that's the worst place to send it. Let's make it a whole lot simpler, and 5 of those envelopes in every police car, so that when that man was standing there right in front of me taking my statement in the living room, could have handed me that packet right then and there and said, hey, you need to look over this information. It's going to have resources, because I needed to know that morning. No, it's bright and early, but it's Friday. I've been up and at 'em and getting a lot of that is the kind of information that I needed at that moment. I didn't need it a month and a half down the line, let alone at that address. I needed it that moment. That would have given me the resources on, where to go. I could have gone the next day to that office and, sat down with them and got the resources and the tools. My whole experience would have been completely different, if we were able to make these changes that just seem to me to be so obvious. And I have tried to talk to some people, um, but it's tough to get people to change the system when they don't realize, it's complicated. Well, okay, well, but it's hard to change other people's habits. And you're not just talking about people's habits, you're talking about municipalities and nonprofits and law enforcement, and all of the people that are within those organizations and those entities. That's a lot of change. And um but I think that it can be done. And it would be easier if people wanted to look at it. No one wants to look at the system because no one wants to talk about domestic violence. But it's October, and October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so that's why I'm continuing the conversation, because we need to start talking more about abuse. That's how we start making some changes. You guys have an absolutely wonderful day, and stay safe.